It had been about 2 years since the last time I had visited the Moonville Tunnel. Since then, a lot had happened. Everybody has been stuck inside for a long time because of COVID-19. The pandemic had hit. I call this time BC, meaning before COVID. The weather was beautiful this day, and many people came out to see Moonville Tunnel just to enjoy themselves and to see a part of history. As you can see, when you cross the bridge before you get to the tunnel, you will see many locks. There's padlocks, different kinds of locks of all different kinds, some with messages, and it is thought that the meaning why people started putting the locks on there because two people fell to their deaths on the railroad tracks, and two locks were originally placed on the gates of the bridge to remember them. Here is a dumbbell lock. It is my favorite out of all of them that I've seen that day. On this day, the weather was beautiful outside. It had been a while since everybody had been out, and Moonville was known as a local tourist attraction for many urban legends, myths, and ghost tales. For those of you that don't know any history about Moonville, I will read a little now. In 1856, the Marietta and Cincinnati Railroad was pushing through southeastern Ohio to reach Cincinnati. William Cutler, the owner of the fledgling railroad, was having financial problems and was looking to streamline and conserve money while building the railroad. A man named Samuel Cole convinced Cutler to build the railroad on his large property for free. In exchange for a favor, the railroad would be routed through Coe's land in order to haul coal and clay off of his property. This move saved the railroad a great deal by reducing the distance the railroad traveled to Cincinnati. Several coal mines sprang up, and it was found that there was a rich supply of it in the immediate area. Soon the mining town of Moonville was born. Moonville was never a big town, with a peak population in the 1870s of a little over 100. It is thought to have been named for a man named Moon who once operated a store in the town. The town was isolated in the woods and far away from other towns. People had to walk the tracks to get from there to the nearest towns of Hope or Mineral. Vinton County is currently the least populated and most heavily forested county in Ohio. In those days, it was even more wild and heavily forested. Walking the tracks was incredibly dangerous and was made even more hazardous by two long trestles in the area and the long Moonville Tunnel. One trestle stood over Raccoon Creek, less than 50 yards away from the tunnel mouth. By 1920, 6 people lost their lives on the bridges or within the tunnel. The last fatality was reported in 1986 when a 10-year-old girl was struck by a locomotive on that trestle directly in front of the tunnel. However, there is no record of the 10-year-old girl's death online, and the NTSB search tool returns no rail pedestrian fatalities reported in Vinton County in 1986. In 1887, the M&C was bought out by the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, B&O. It quickly became part of a vital line from St. Louis to Washington, D.C. Train traffic increased dramatically, while the town entered a decline from which it never recovered. By the turn of the century, the coal mine slowly started to be used up and closed down. The last family left the town in 1947. By then, the town itself was abandoned. By the 1960s, all of the buildings were gone, and there was little to mark the site other than the town cemetery and the tunnel. More recently, 2 people visiting the ghost town of Moonville fell on the tracks to their deaths. 2 locks were placed on the gates of the bridge in memoriam. The demise of the line. With the town gone, the train traffic continued to increase on the single-track line. In 1973, the B&O merged with the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway and the Western Maryland Railway to form the Chessie system. Train traffic doubled with as many as 14 trains per day. Railroad workers called the most lonesome, desolate 8 miles of track between Parkersburg, West Virginia, and St. Louis. They hated the area because it was isolated, and trains seemed to show up without warning. The line was dark, unsignaled, between Parkersburg and Cincinnati, and traffic was governed by train orders. In 1981, a signal was erected at Moonville. The railroad said that if a railroad worker needed to stop a train, they had to use this signal, not a flashlight or lantern. Engineers and conductors were ordered not to go into emergency unless the signal was read. In June of 1985, CSX announced that the line between Cumberland, Maryland, and Cincinnati would be reduced to secondary status, and the last scheduled freight train passed through the Moonville in August. Trains continued to run until the line was abandoned and the rails pulled up in 1988. The area remains accessible, and the old roadbed provides access to the tunnel. Plans to turn the area into a formal rail trail, the Moonville Rail Trail, have been implemented. 6.5 miles of trail are currently open, with 9.5 miles plus 12 bridges still needed. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and I will leave more information about Moonville in the video description.